What you be spending money on?
On you.
I feel like by looking at us, you guys might have your own ideas of who spends more money. Guys, comment below who you think spends more money. Does Israel spend more money than I do, or do I spend more money? We're gonna give you a moment to
It kind of
type that
depends
in.
on what.
What's up, you guys? So many of you have seen my house tours. But no worries, this is not a house tour. I'm actually super excited to share with you guys how I got to a certain place in my life financially where I could finally afford a home and invest in real estate properties. Before Israel and I got married, one of the really important things for us to talk about was finances.
Sure.
What was important to you?
Yeah, I've lived by this phrase that you have to tell your money where to go. Otherwise, your money is going to come back later and tell you where it's been. So the idea of like really being intentional about what you spend money on, what matters. And I just, we had that conversation as friends even before we started dating, but like, what are you doing about assets? It's like, it's one thing to have a bunch of great clothes and sneakers and jewelry and cars, etc. But like, what assets do you actually own? Because all those other things are depreciating in value immediately.
Before we got married, we actually sat down and figured out what our overhead was going to look like, what you're spending money on every single month. And for me, randomly, and as a couple, we realized we were spending we're talking so much money on food delivery apps. And those simple changes in our lives really helped us to reach our goal in savings so that we could then invest our money in real estate.
The next thing we had to identify was how we were going to split up our income and expenses, like things that we had to put money into, and who was covering what, and that was a quick conversation. I don't think it was very long. It was like, let's both lean in and handle what needs to be handled. And, it's been that way for 6 years now.
It's so weird because every single couple is gonna have a very different way of approaching this. And I feel like whatever works for you, works for you. Yeah. But for Iz and I, it was actually really important for us to keep our finances separate. So that meant we've never had a joint bank account. You guys have seen so many of the things that I've done to my home. I covered the first half of the renovations, and Israel is in charge of covering the second half of the renovations, which include his studio and all that man cave stuff. I'm like, you got that, boo. There's a difference between having access versus being very clear to see what we are spending independently. I think that that's very different. That doesn't mean that I don't have access to his money. If I need anything, if I wanted it, same for you. If there was something you're like, babe, hello, all of the New Breed stuff, I've absolutely helped fund in a major way. So you have access to my money too because I invest in you.
Of course.
Technically, I guess you could say we do have an account together because we do have a business together and there is an account for that. But here we go. These are the accounts that we actually have. I have my own personal account that, crazy enough, I just got 2 years ago because I kept charging all of my expenses out of my business account, which became a tax nightmare. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that both things are very clearly separate. Funny enough, I actually pay myself out of my business account. So every 2 weeks, a payment comes into my personal account that is paid out of my Bezos business account. Israel has a similar thing. He has a company called Anthems, and Anthems pays him.
It's a loan out company. Yeah.
It's a loan out company, and it pays you.
Correct.
Your money for your personal account. It should never feel uncomfortable to discuss finances as a couple. I think for me, that is a major red flag in your relationship. If you're going into a marriage and it feels uncomfortable, awkward, or weird to have money convos, pay attention to that. I never felt weird about it. And if anything, I actually always loved how you've encouraged me to have financial independence. I was a first-time homeowner when I bought my home in Calabasas versus Israel has actually owned how many homes at this point?
At this point, probably 10.
No way.
8 to 10, yeah.
8 to 10 homes, and I had never purchased a home and had no idea what that process even looked like. But guys, that's the fun part. If you have someone in your life who does have that information, sit down with them and pick their brain.
Yeah.
Ask them all of these things. That's why I'm so grateful that he didn't just hand me or buy me a house and say, here you go. He actually walked me through the steps and gave me the knowledge that I will have for the rest of my life to continue to invest my money.
And I would say credit played a huge role in that. It's one thing to be successful. It's one thing to have money in the bank account that you're talking about. It's quite another when you want to go buy a house, or like even in your case, like
That was
getting
my
an
biggest struggle.
apartment. Just getting an apartment. You've talked about this pretty openly.
My
before.
sister had to co-sign for me. So here's the thing. Growing up, my mom did the best she could with giving me financial advice. And the financial advice that she knew back in the day was do not fall into debt
yeah.
by having credit cards. So in my mom's mind, she was really giving me great advice by telling me when I turned 18 years old and all those credit cards suddenly appeared in the mail, she was like, don't do it, don't do it. Never spend money that you don't have, was my mom's biggest thing. And while that is very true, it's very difficult to build credit with that mindset.
Correct.
So although I had all of this money in the bank that I had saved from literally working since I was 14 years old, the simplest thing, like getting an apartment in LA when I got my job at The Real, was impossible. I found the apartment I wanted. I was so obsessed. I was so excited. And then I got to the leasing office and they were like, you've been denied. What? My sister ended up having to co-sign for my first apartment in LA. And that was embarrassing, honestly. And I felt like it made it look like I didn't have the money. And that was not the case.
The same thing happened when you were going to buy a house. When we started talking about, okay, let's get a new asset, and I said to you, I think this should be yours. And we had that same issue. It's like, you have money.
First of all, shout out to having a husband who was like, I had all this money in the bank, I didn't know what to do with it, and he's like, oh my gosh, like, you should invest in real estate. I was like, really? Like I could buy a house, and he was
You
like—
were even like, do you think I can? Do you think, should I, can I? Am I
Yeah.
qualified? And once we started figuring out the credit piece of it, I was able to encourage you. I was able to guide you.
This is why it is so important to have a financial ally, someone that is willing to not only keep you accountable, but also give you the knowledge and the information you need so that you can make really wise decisions and get better.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about credit. The whole point is you want to be able to prove that you are trustworthy. How you prove that you are trustworthy is by people lending you money and you pretty much proving that you will pay it back. And not just pay it back with interest, and also pay it back in a timely manner.
Yeah.
So that's the game. That's the game you're gonna play. You need to have things that are on recurring— what is that whole thing?
Revolving credit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's one of the first things we did was like, okay, let's get some trade lines going.
What are trade lines?
Trade lines are accounts, credit accounts that show up on your credit report. Lines of credit, so that you could show recurring payments on a revolving account and that you were paying large amounts back per month in a timely manner. Also, prior to getting the house, we got a new vehicle, and then we took all her payments, anything that she was responsible for, phone, etc., all of that got put on auto pay, so there was no chance of any payments falling through the
So
cracks.
that no debt collectors were calling me saying I had missed any payments. So guys, auto pay is your friend. It is so important that even though prior to getting married, we checked out what our overhead looked like and what those payments would look like, it's important to do that like annually.
Often, yeah.
Like do it often. If you have any shifts, if you have different jobs coming in or not coming in, you sit down as a couple and you're like, okay, babe, this is our overhead. What do you want to handle? What do I want to handle?
I know there are like traditional relationships where like the guy handles everything, or
I don't want that.
yeah.
I want to feel like I equally contribute to my home. I don't know if it's because I was raised by a mom
You
that
are
was like,
Nilda's daughter.
there should be no reason that you do not have your name on that home, that you don't have ownership in that home. It takes a strong man to handle that sort of thing. Thank you for being that strong man. I know so many of you may be watching this right now saying, oh my gosh, I don't even know why I'm watching something about investments. I don't have money like that to invest. Listen, you do not have to be in a certain tax bracket to invest your money. There are so many different options, literally from, I have an account that is literally just a savings account that actually builds money for me. Like the longer I have the money just sitting in there, the more money I make. So it's really just an act of self-discipline to be like, I'm not gonna touch it. I'm putting a little something in there and let me see what it becomes. $5 and $10 can actually become something substantial after a certain amount of time. So again, it is super important to do your research, especially if you're trying to become a homeowner. There are so many programs out there.
You just gotta be knowledgeable, and what you don't know yet, you can certainly go find out.
The reason why I chose to invest my money mainly in real estate, Israel does a bunch of other investing, but for me personally, it felt the safest because one, it's something that I'm actually really passionate about. Your girl can stay on Zillow, Redfin. I can literally look at that stuff all day long. And one of my favorite things to look at is how much the values of homes have gone up and down and what you can get from doing the smallest renovation to a home. So literally, Israel and I painted cabinets white, and suddenly, because we had a white kitchen, the value of the home
increased.
Skyrocketed.
Yeah.
I actually got a write-up in Realtor.com that was saying Adrienne has caught the home flipping bug. I was like, I didn't even know I caught a bug, but hey, I loved the fact that they were saying that I was being really smart with my investment and the home that I had purchased and then later sold. So babe, because I lean on you for financial advice, what is maybe a financial mistake you've made in your life that you would do differently now?
I will say that I have learned this lesson the hard way now 3 or 4 times. If one of the investments you are making into a new home or a used home, but a new home for you, is the inspection.
Guys, when you are about to buy a house, it is required that you have an inspection on the home. An inspector comes in, looks at everything from making sure that the dishwasher in the home works, making sure the refrigerators are actually functional and they're fine. Fireplaces need to be inspected perfectly. Your roof needs to be inspected perfectly because what you don't want to buy is a dud that maybe on the outside looks perfect but has tons of issues internally that then you're gonna end up spending so much more money for. So if you buy a house for 250 grand, and then you end up finding it needs a completely new roof that's gonna cost you 150 grand, that's maybe not something that you are prepared to do, and that becomes a money pit.
Let contractors come in and bid the job. Most contractors will come for free for the first estimate.
Yeah.
Let them all get 4 or 5 guys in there to bid it out and point out to you what's wrong. Going into house purchasing without really knowing what you're purchasing is probably the biggest mistake. The mountain I've had to go around several times on a very, very costly mistake.
I feel like by looking at us, you guys might have your own ideas of who spends more money.
Yeah, I freely admit that I spend way more than you do.
What you be spending money on?
On you.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope that we helped you get some information, hopefully encouraged you and inspired you to start investing. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Be learning.
Hit the little
notification button in the corner so that you can always know when there's new episodes of what? All Things Adrienne.